The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our guest today, Rebecca Austill-Clausen, is an author, speaker, Reiki master, and occupational therapist who saw her life change one day when, out for a horseback ride, she met and communicated with her deceased brother. Here's a brief passage from her book, Changemaker. I realized speech was unnecessary. Sending messages via stream of consciousness or thought was much faster than speaking with words. I sent my questions telepathically and received instantaneous answers. I shared my extreme sadness at his death, my half-hearted attempts to focus at work, my inability to understand the purpose of his passing. I absorbed his rapid-fire responses, his acceptance of the situation, his willingness to communicate, his ability to transmit unconditional love. Then we shared family updates. Rebecca, welcome to NDE Radio.
Well, thank you, Lee, so much. It's great to talk with you and your audience.
Well, it's wonderful to talk to you, too. You're traveling in an RV right now on your way to Denver, and it just amazes me continually how technology has advanced just during my lifetime.
It is astounding. It's quite fun. I'm headed to the International New Age Trade Show, and my book, Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life, is up for 2 awards with the Coalition of Visionary Resources, so it's going to be a total blast to just see how this all transpires.
Congratulations. That's terrific. Well, listen,
it's fun.
Tell us about your brother and how your ADC with him first came about.
I am happy to do this. This all happened in 1995, and my brother David was 37 years old when he passed, and he passed of AIDS, and it was when lots of people were dying of AIDS. And I think everything in life is positive, and I couldn't find anything positive about this experience. Yeah. And so for about 6 weeks, I was filled with grief, and my heart, I'm sorry, I'm from Boston, it's a Boston accent. So my heart was closed, but it was 6 weeks after he passed, and I was riding my horse to a Christmas tree farm, and it was a beautiful day, and it was in November, Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, and I opened my heart, and I said, thank you for this gorgeous day. We had rainbows sparkling. It was a first frost, and it was just lovely. And I closed my eyes, and there was my brother. And I was not psychic. I was not spiritual. None of this had ever happened to me before. And he was wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. And it was absolutely incredible. It was incredible. Wow. It was a glorious experience. And I looked behind him, and there were my grandparents who had passed, and Edward, his best friend, who had passed, and Holly, a friend of mine, who had passed. And it was an unworldly experience that transformed my life.
Did you see them in your setting, or were they in a different landscape altogether?
Yeah, good question. David, it was in a traditional earthly setting. David was on a hill, and then I looked behind him, and it was a grassy hill. And behind him, on my right side, was another hill. And that was grassy and such. And I looked behind David, and there was a golden-colored arch. And I've been reading a fair amount about other realities and after-death communication, but I didn't know anybody that did this. And so I had an idea that when there's a door or an arch or something, it could mean we're going into a different form of reality. And so I looked to my brother to see if he'd take me through the arch, and instead my 4'10" Graham of Bessie Dole skipped me through the arch, and we ended up on this fuchsia-colored land, which was not earthly. And my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, Gramps, I heard him. I didn't see him, but I heard him, and he took me by the hand, and we actually flew through this fuchsia-colored arch, sharing thoughts and memories until my horse started to move, because I was on my horse. And yes. I said to Gramps, I need to go back. And we did this U-turn in this fuchsia-colored land. We came to the arch. We came back to this earthly type of setting where my brother's there, and my grandparents, and Edward and Holly, and my horse is moving. And I said, I need to go back. And the resounding statement filled with love was, we will always be here. And I opened up my eyes and pulled up my horse and sat there and thought, what just happened to me? It was a glorious experience. Changed my life.
Mm. Now, who was the first to communicate? Did he first telepathically communicate with you, or did you to him, or how did that work?
When I closed my eyes, David was there, and I was so astounded to see him in physical form, and I guess it was simultaneous. You know, I said, Dave, maybe I started. I'm not exactly sure. How are you? And he was fine, and he wasn't in pain, and he was good, and he was healthy. And then we shared, and with only a couple of seconds, even less than seconds, everything was shared and everything was good.
So did it seem timeless, or did it seem like it's a very brief experience?
No, it was timeless. There was no time. It's taken me years to try to understand how there can be no time. And, when we travel into these other realms, there's no time. There's time on Earth, but there does not appear to be time any other place.
And when he communicated with you, what did he tell you, besides being fine?
He was great. Life was perfect. He wasn't in any pain. He was thrilled to be with me, and it was glorious. It was exactly what I wanted. I was so sad that David wasn't around, but now he is around, and he's around all the time. And so what happened was I went to look for a teacher, and I had a little difficulty trying to find a teacher, and I finally just asked the universe, which I never do because I'm pretty much of a planner, I'm a scientist, I'm an organizer, I'm a medical professional. But I asked the universe, I said, please send me a teacher. And a friend of mine, Amy Carroll, who's also an occupational therapist, and she was on my staff at the time, she came and said she found someone she thought I'd like, and it turned out to be a shaman, and I didn't even know what a shaman was. And I said, well, what's a shaman? She said, well, I think a shaman believes that everything in life has energy. And so I ended up meeting this shaman who lived close to me, and I thought shamans lived in Brazil or Peru or whatever. But she was an awesome woman, Nancy Ariel. And I apprenticed with her for 3 to 6 hours a week for a year and learned a lot about how to communicate with my brother, additional entities. Life is continuous. Learned about Reiki. It's been a glorious, glorious experience. But I was scared to share this, and so I wrote it all down and recorded all my sessions. But I had no courage to share this until a couple of years ago when I ended up selling my business because I wanted to share this story, but I didn't want to impact the business. And so I sold the business to my chief financial officer, and we had worked together for 20 years. And it was so awesome. I said to him, Bob, my soul is crying out for me to publish this story. And he said, well, I'd be very glad to stay here, even if you're not here. And I thought, oh my gosh, you'd like to buy the business? And he said, only if you think I can do it. And I'd had this business for 32 years, and it was a wonderful, wonderful transition and experience, and it's allowed me to now share my knowledge that life continues forever and that we can communicate with loved ones that have passed on.
Mm. Now, you say your communication with your brother is ongoing. Does he watch what's happening on Earth, not only to you, but to the world in general? Does he have any thoughts on those things?
That's a great question, Lee. I have to say yes. And so I've been communicating with my brother for 24 years regularly. And we've had wonderful experiences and very unearthly experiences and very many experiences that have been synchronicity, that have caused synchronicity. Last fall, I was at a conference, and there was a medium by the name of Thomas John. And I'm one of 160 people in what's called a galley avenue, a galley reading. He had no idea I was there. And he said, I have a large group of people here that are here to share their information. And they're led by a brother by the name of David. And so I thought, oh, my gosh, that's my brother. So I raised my hand, and not only was David there, but he got the name, this evidential medium, Thomas John, got the name Edward, Lorraine, and and Lorene had passed, and they had lived together. David and Lorene had lived together for years. She was there. My parents, you got the names of my parents, and all this. It's on YouTube, and it's under it's under my name and Thomas John Medium, and it was 10 minutes of incredible confirmation and validation that yes, David is aware of what's happening on Earth. It's astounding, absolutely astounding.
Mm. Is there any prophetic content to what he has to tell you?
He does not prophesize. He very much is supportive, and I believe that we all have free will and we're all here on Earth to live our own journey. And so David doesn't impact what I'm doing as far as give me thoughts and ideas, but he does support, because we're all here to live our best way possible. And so it's, in my opinion, it's not really up to anybody except for us to lead the way forward.
Robert Mays, who's connected with IANDS, he and his wife,
yes,
I just learned, are researching prophecy as it comes from NDEs and other spiritually transformative experiences. So if something like that should come up, you should get in touch with them, and you'll see them at the conference in Philadelphia anyway. But I wanted to ask, you teach a course in how to do this, don't you?
Yes, yes. And actually, I'm sorry, go for it.
No, well, I just wanted you to elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. I had no psychic or spiritual experience when all this happened, and there's nothing special about me that allows me to be able to communicate with my brother and additional loved ones that have passed on. And so I thought, if I can do this, why don't I teach other people how to do this? And so I'm so excited at the IANDS conference, which is held 20 minutes from my house this year. It's in King of Prussia, and it's 35 minutes west of Philadelphia. And it's from August 29th to September 1st. I am teaching a course called Whispers from Beyond the Veil, After-Death Communication Techniques. And it talks about how we can communicate with our loved ones that have passed on. And it's not hard. It's not hard to do, but it does require a belief that the information that we're receiving that maybe we might question, like maybe a bird might come, and that bird might be your mother's favorite bird. And we think, that's my mother's favorite bird. Well, that very easily could be our mother, could be your mother. And so it's a major belief that we can communicate. And so I have like 7 different steps that I go through as far as helping people communicate with loved ones. And it does seem to assist others in their journey to communicate with loved ones that have passed on. So that workshop's going to be on Saturday at the conference, 4 to 6. But you okay if I talk a little bit about the conference?
Sure, go ahead. And then I'm going to bring you back to your brother again. But go ahead, because I'm going to be at the conference myself. It's always a wonderful experience, especially for people who've had personal mystical experiences, because suddenly you're in a room full of people who know what you're saying is true and share that kind of enthusiasm for it. So these conferences are truly inspirational. But go ahead and tell us more about it.
Oh, Lee, thanks so much, and I can't wait to meet you in person. The conference it's August 29th to September 1st, and it is in King of Prussia, 35 minutes from Philly. And I also went last year. It was the very first time I'd gone to a conference, and it is phenomenal. 3.5 days of validating, empowering experiences with hundreds of physicians, researchers, scientists, the general public, educators, all believing in after-death communication, in near-death experiences, in spiritual transformative experiences. This year's conference is called Revolutionary Experiences, the Power of Love and Consciousness. And it's such a wonderful descriptor of what's going to happen. Dr. Suzanne Giesman, who's been in the military and is now an evidential medium, is one of the keynotes. She has a Unity radio show that's fantastic. Another keynote is Dr. Eben Alexander. He's a physician, New York Times bestseller of the book Proof of Heaven. And so he's another keynote. Kevin Kern, I don't know if you've heard Kevin Kern. He's a pianist, a Steinway pianist, and he's one of the evening pleasures. And he does beautiful, beautiful music, very healing and very soothing to those that have had near-death experiences. There's a whole special track, healthcare, education, research, and science that is really quite validating and filled with very good information. Lots of exhibitors, great bookstore. I'm also involved in the healers room, and there's going to be a great amount of healers, mediums, energy healers, including Reiki, angel card readers, iridology, Native American speakers, bioenergetics. And so people can come to the healers room and receive like about 20 minutes of specialized healing if they want. There's a military track, and it's a great military track for anybody that's been in the military, and there's also potential discounts for those that have been in the military that have had NDEs and or spiritual transformative experiences and may have some disabilities. There's an experiencer's lounge for people that have had experiences and want to share it. So it's really going to be great fun. Now, there's early registration. It goes up until June 30th. I'm on the planning committee, so I happen to know all of this.
Yes.
But early registration goes until June 30th, and then there's what they call a hurry-up discounted registration that goes until August 6th. So it's a great conference. Absolutely fantastic. Highly encouraged.
If military are listening and think they might get to the conference, they should look for Diane Corcoran, who was the previous president of IANDS. She was a military nurse and is very interested in veterans' experiences with NDEs and similar events. And so many interesting stories come out of those accounts. One of them was a story I heard where the man died in battle and several of his companions died at the same time. All of their souls were rising up out of their bodies, and they saw each other. They were communicating with each other, and he was the only one to survive and come back. But stories like that are so powerful and so important to understanding what happens when we die, that if there are any veterans or military that are coming to the conference, they should look for Diane. Okay, we'll get back to your brother. Has he ever appeared to you visually? And I don't mean with your eyes, but do you see him when he comes and communicates with you?
Most of the time I do, but sometimes I just hear him. A lot of times I'll hear him in my mind. And he has a different energy signature, and it sounds just like David. He uses the same type of voice, and so I'll hear him. One of the things that happened to me was when I started to learn all about this. This was 20 years ago, and so 20 years ago, it was not as accepted as it is now, and so I was getting a little far out as far as my experiences and beliefs, and I knew that, but it felt great, and it felt real, and it felt comfortable, and I believed it. And one of the things that happened is I went to the American Occupational Therapy Association annual conference, and people asked me how I was doing. And at that point, it was about 3 months after I had these experiences, and I had no filter, and so I shared what had happened to me, and it did not go over professionally too well. But at the end of the conference, I did meet a woman that told me about automatic writing. And I was like, what's that? And she said, well, that's when your pen starts to move across the paper and a spiritual entity will provide information to you. And I'm like, no kidding. And I'd never heard about that. So the next day I went home and I was riding my horse, and I used to meditate when I was on the horse. Now, this is after David's appeared. It's about 3 or 4 months after he appeared in the Christmas tree farm. And so I put the horse out to pasture. I'm sitting in my car writing, and all of a sudden, my pen started to move across the page. And I thought, oh, my gosh, I can either freak out or listen, read what happened. And I said, who are you? And they said, I am love. And I said, love. And it said, I am Lot. So what's your name? I am Lot, L-O-T. And so Lot came and left me beautiful messages about the continuation of life and what's happened in the past, what can happen in the future, sort of bringing in your prophecy concepts here, and talking about how we're all connected. And so that continued for 3 or 4 months. And then at that point, Lot said he was leaving. And my husband used to sit beside me and he'd say, Becky, ask Lot this and ask Lot that, because he was trying to trip him up. And it really was quite valid. And I've got thousands of pages of Lot's information, very similar to Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God series, very similar to that. And it happened about the same time. So a lot of times my brother will come through in an automatic writing sequence as well. And that works for me because when I go into meditation, it's an easy way for me to shut off my brain because I just sit there, close my eyes, sit there at my computer, and then the words come into my brain. They come into my brain, and then it just flows through my hands, and I type out all this information. And it's a very quick way to receive communication from my brother, from all these different types of spiritual entities, from deceased loved ones that have passed. And it's also very nice because a lot of times when particularly relatives have passed, I'll go into the afterlife and ask to communicate with them, and I'll be typing all of this down. And then for me to be able to share that information with loved ones has been fabulous. It's been very, very validating for loved ones that have passed on to receive a typed transcript of the information that I've received from them. So when you're talking about different ways of communication, that's been one very interesting way that David communicates.
Now, who did Lot describe himself as being? Was he a deceased person or an angel of some sort?
Oh, Lee, that are so interesting. Gosh, I'll have to like go back and see exactly who he. I don't think he had a descriptor. I always thought of him as a spiritual guide, and so I didn't get the impression that he was a deceased human that was familiar with me. I just got the impression that he was a guide that communicated with a variety of people, and I was lucky enough to have him communicate with me for 3 to 4 months. It was awesome. It was really fun, and I can get him back. But he's doing his thing with all these other folks and all that jazz, and I definitely felt that it was a masculine presence. It was a blast.
A lot of organized religions are so wary of these things because they say, well, it could be some sort of evil spirit. They warn you against Ouija boards and that kind of communication. Do you feel that there's an ominous side to this kind of communication at all?
Lee, ask the best questions. No, I do not want that negative side around me. And so I've been doing this for 24 years. 99% of all the communications, I'd say 99.95% of all the communications I've had, and these are it's probably thousands of spiritual communications I've had and spiritual entities that I've talked with. 99.95% of them are positive. But once in a very great while, there is a negative. There's something negative. And the thing that I've learned is to trust my gut. We do need to trust ourselves. And if something doesn't feel right, I just send them away. And I send them away with a very clear message. I do not want you. I do not need you. Please go away. And then there's a whole concept called shielding where we can actually shield ourselves from entities or energy that we don't want. And a quick way to do shielding, there's many ways to do shielding, but a quick way that I describe to people is if we surround ourselves with a clear plate of glass, an egg-shaped plate of glass, and you can set the thickness as thin or as thick as you want. But traditionally, I encourage people to set it at 6 to 12 inches away from our body. And we can see out and people can see in, but the thickness of the glass prevents us from receiving energy that we don't want to have. And you have to visualize it. You set up your shield and then you visualize it. And I don't encourage people to shield a lot because it's hard to send and receive energy. But if you're trying to block something, then that is and has been for me an effective way to shield. But most of the time, and then we let it go. Then you let it go. and the energy is gone, and we proceed onward, and we don't think about it because, or at least I encourage people not to think about it because there's no need to think about it. I think if we just send positive energy forward, our life will continue to be positive. And so it's been really interesting. I teach this concept with Reiki, and it's been really interesting to bring Reiki, which is a healthcare complementary energy modality. I've been bringing that to the medical professions, and I've been doing that since 2015. And, it brings the empathy and the healing back to the medical professionals that a lot of times we're so interested in productivity. We sort of are not as interested, as able to provide the empathetic responses, which is why we went into the field anyway. So it's been really a wonderful thing.
As a hospital chaplain, I worked with a Reiki team of volunteers who would come into the hospital, and I would encourage patients who were in pain or psychological pain to have a visit from a Reiki practitioner. It was so healing. It's such a wonderful thing to do for people to get that chi flowing again. And I like to compare it to the Holy Spirit, that essence, that power is all around us all the time, and we just have to acknowledge it and work with it and not fight it. And I think Reiki tends to smooth that out and make everything possible again.
Well said, Lee. I absolutely agree. And when we work with Reiki, like when I teach people how to provide Reiki to clients, the first thing we learn is how to do it to ourselves. And then the other concept, the main concept, a major concept, is that it's not us providing Reiki to the client. It's the client's own energy system that is being activated. And so we're empowering the client to activate their own energy system. And yes, it's a beautiful way to receive relaxation, to receive calmness, and you can learn it in one day. And so for a couple of years, I'm like, how can this be valid? How can you learn something so profound in one day? But you can. I mean, that's how a lot of Reiki is taught. You can learn it in one day. And yes, it's glorious.
And if someone were nervous about after-death communication or afraid of the other side, afraid of ghosts or possession, things along that line, the confidence that you could gain if you felt you were in charge of the what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that the Reiki idea provides that glass shield in a way that you were talking about earlier. That's a protective barrier that keeps you positive and whole and intact against anything that might try to invade your space.
That's wonderful. That is a wonderful descriptor. And quite frankly, what Reiki does is it raises our vibrational energy. And so it raises our vibrational energy. And if we wanted to communicate with loved ones that have passed on, it puts us in an easier way to communicate with them because our vibrational energy is raised. And people in the afterlife, they lower their vibrational energy. And so it's a very effective way to facilitate communication with our loved ones that have passed on. And most of the time, I'd say, probably 92, 93% of the time, when I teach Reiki, there is some form of after-death communication. Now, it doesn't always happen, but most of the time it does. And these are people that have most of the time never, ever, ever communicated with loved ones. And so it's very gratifying and beautiful to see. It's really quite awesome. Yes.
Rebecca, we are just about out of time for today. I wonder, tell our audience how they can find your book or learn more about your courses.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you again so much for having me. The book's name is Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. And you can get it pretty much all over the place. Of course, Amazon has it in print or ebook, Barnes & Noble, indie bookstores. My website is my name, so it's Rebecca Austill-Clausen.com. And you can get the book there. I've got a lot of suggested books and products on the website. I've got my events that are upcoming, things like that. And my name doesn't have any hyphen on the website. So it's just RebeccaAustill-Clausen.com, no hyphen, no spaces. And I'm very accessible. Like, I love talking to people, and I love talking with you, Lee, and I love the fact that you're from IANDS Radio. Like, it just cracks me up. I'm just thrilled. And I encourage everybody to come to the conference. The conference is great.
Thank you for plugging the conference. It should be a great event, as always. If listeners would like to hear this show again or any of our past shows, go to our website at nderadio.org. For information on IANDS and the upcoming IANDS conference in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, near Valley Forge, where you'll get to meet Rebecca and me, check out that website at iands.org. And join us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.